December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. As the Japanese attack shattered American innocence, one machine defined the air superiority of the Empire of Japan. It was the Mitsubishi A6M Zero. When the Zero first appeared in the skies over the Pacific, it was a terrifying mystery. It was faster than anything the Allies had, possessed an incredible range, and could turn tighter than any opposing fighter. Allied pilots flying the lumbering P-40 Warhawks and F-4F Wildcats were slaughtered in the early months of the war. The Zero was the undisputed master of the Pacific, a symbol of Japanese technical genius, and the dark storm of their early expansion. But this dominance was built on a single fatal flaw. This is the story of the Zero's meteoric rise, its reign of terror, and the American strategy that finally cracked its code and brought the King of the Pacific crashing back to Earth. The Zero was not designed for a simple carrier defense. It was designed for the vast distances of the Pacific. The Imperial Japanese Navy demanded a fighter with an astronomical range, speed, and maximum maneuverability. To achieve this, designer Jiro Horikoshi made a critical life-and-death trade-off: weight for armor. The Zero's airframe was built incredibly light, almost delicate, with a massive fuel capacity. Crucially, it lacked self-sealing fuel tanks and pilot armor plating. This allowed the Zero to achieve its mythical speed and turning radius, but it meant that a single burst of American fire could turn the plane into an instant fireball. In the early war months, this weakness was irrelevant. The Zero's initial victories were often 10-1 against its opponents. Its two 20mm cannons and two machine guns gave it massive firepower, and its speed and climb rate were unmatched. It was a fighter built for offense, not defense. The psychological impact of the Zero's early performance was immense. At the start of the war, the Allies didn't even know its specifications. Initial reports of its performance were often dismissed as exaggerated pilot panic. From the skies over China to the jungles of the Solomon Islands, the Zero dominated. It made the American F-4F Wildcat look obsolete. Japanese aces like Saburo Sakai and Hiroyoshi Nishizawa became legends, piling up kills against the overwhelmed Allied forces. The Zero excelled in the low-speed, high-G turning dogfight, which was the traditional style of air combat. Allied pilots who dared to enter a turning battle with the Zero rarely returned. This early period was defined by confusion and fear in the Allied ranks. The Zero's strategic high point came during the Battle of Midway. Although the Japanese Navy lost 4 aircraft carriers, the Zero pilots proved their tactical superiority, devastating American torpedo bomber attacks. The problem was not the plane. The problem was the carriers themselves. The key to defeating the Zero came not from better training, but from a miracle of intelligence. In June 1942, during a raid on the Akutan Islands, a Zero piloted by Warrant Officer Tadayoshi Koga was damaged and crashed almost intact on Akutan Island. The cold, soft mud preserved the aircraft. The Americans secretly recovered the Zero, an intelligence coup of massive proportions. They meticulously studied its structure, engines, and control systems. What they discovered confirmed their fears and, critically, revealed the fatal flaw. The Zero's incredible maneuverability came at the cost of structural integrity. Its lightness made its controls stiff and ineffective at high speeds. This was the key. The Zero was a champion at slow speeds, but it was a sluggish disaster above 250 knots. This discovery led to the development of the new American tactics that would ultimately doom the Zero. Armed with the Zero's secrets, U.S. Navy and Marine Corps pilots, led by figures like Major John Smith, developed the devastating counter-tactic, thatch weave and the boom and zoom. The rule was simple: never ever turn with a Zero. Pilots flying the new powerful American fighters, like the Grumman F-6F Hellcat and the chance-fought F-4U Corsair, were ordered to use their superior engine power and structural integrity. The boom and zoom approach meant attacking the Zero from above, using speed to dive down, fire a long, devastating burst, and use the momentum to climb straight back up, out of the Zero's turning range. If a Zero tried to follow the dive, its delicate airframe would often tear apart, or its controls would lock up. The fight was over in seconds. The Zero was now fighting against a machine it could not catch and could not damage easily, piloted by men who knew its every weakness. The war of agility had become a war of attrition and pure power. By 1943, the superior American industrial machine was delivering fighters that completely outclassed the aging Zero. The F-6F Hellcat was nicknamed the Zero Killer. It was built ruggedly, with self-sealing fuel tanks and armor plating, everything the Zero lacked. It was heavier, but its massive engine gave it power and speed. The Hellcat ended the war with a kill ratio of 19.1 against the Zero. The F-4U Corsair was even faster and more powerful, becoming the ultimate dogfighter of the late Pacific War. The Japanese struggled to upgrade the Zero. They attempted to fit heavier engines and more armor, but every addition compromised its core strength, its lightness. The Zero was caught in a technical trap. By 1944, it was obsolete, being flown by poorly trained novice pilots against a torrent of superior American aircraft. As the war turned decisively against Japan, the final tragic chapter of the Zero began: the kamikaze attacks. The Zero's lightweight, maneuverable airframe made it suitable for the desperate suicide missions. In these final months, the Zero was no longer a symbol of air superiority, but a weapon of last resort, thrown directly at the U.S. fleet. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero was a magnificent, albeit fatally flawed creation. It was a fighter that represented the ultimate dedication to offensive capability at the expense of defensive realism. It taught the American Navy the ultimate lesson of air combat. In the Pacific, the winner is the machine that can take a hit and keep flying. The Zero was the undisputed king of the Pacific for a brief, terrifying time. But in the end, it was defeated not by superior agility, but by superior engineering, better tactics, and the overwhelming, unstoppable force of American industrial might. The ghost was exorcised, and the skies were claimed.